The day my son looked me in the eyes and said, "Mom, you're too poor to meet her family," I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't even ask him why. Instead, I smiled. Not because his words didn't hurt. They did. They cut deeper than anything I had ever heard in my 67 years of life. But sometimes, when you've carried enough pain, your heart becomes quiet instead of loud. My name is Jolly. I am a Black American woman from Charlotte, North Carolina. I spent most of my life working as a school cafeteria cook. It wasn't glamorous work, but every meal I served was made with love. I believed that kindness mattered more than money. I believed that people remembered how you treated them, not what you owned. For 35 years, I raised my son, Marcus, mostly on my own. His father passed away when Marcus was only 7 years old. From that day on, I became both mother and father. I worked early mornings before the sun came up. I cleaned tables after school events. Sometimes I worked 2 jobs just to keep food on our table. There were nights when I skipped dinner so Marcus could have seconds. He never knew, and I wanted it to stay that way. As a little boy, Marcus had the biggest smile. Every Friday, we'd stop by the same ice cream shop after school. We'd sit on the same wooden bench, laughing about his teachers, his baseball games, and the dreams he had for the future. He used to hold my hand wherever we went. Back then, he wasn't embarrassed to call me his mother. He was proud. Years passed, and Marcus grew into a smart young man. He earned scholarships, graduated from college, and landed a great job in finance. I couldn't have been prouder. Every achievement felt like my own victory. Then one evening, he called with exciting news. "Mom," he said, "I'm getting married." I nearly dropped the spoon I was holding. "Oh, Marcus, that's wonderful," I laughed. "Tell me everything." Her name was Vanessa. She was beautiful, successful, and came from one of the wealthiest families in the state. Her parents owned several companies. They lived in a mansion people often drove by just to admire from the road. I was happy for him. Love doesn't care about bank accounts. At least, that's what I believed. Over the next few months, Marcus became busier than ever. Our weekly phone calls became monthly ones. Sometimes my messages stayed unanswered for days. I told myself that wedding planning was stressful. I didn't want to believe anything had changed. One Saturday afternoon, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was the wedding invitation. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. I placed it on my kitchen table and stared at it for nearly an hour. I imagined watching my son say his vows. I imagined hugging him afterward and welcoming Vanessa into our family. I even took out my old photo albums. There were pictures of Marcus wearing paper crowns at birthday parties. Pictures of him holding my hand on his first day of school. Pictures of us dancing in our tiny living room because we couldn't afford vacations. Those memories were richer than any mansion. A week before the wedding, Marcus stopped by my little house. He looked nervous. He barely sat down before speaking. "Mom, there's something we need to talk about." I poured him a cup of coffee, just like I always had. "What is it, baby?" He stared into the cup instead of looking at me. "Vanessa's parents are different," I smiled gently. "Every family is different." He shook his head. "No, Mom, they care a lot about appearances." I didn't understand what he meant. Then he took a slow breath. "They're billionaires. They expect a certain image." I stayed quiet. His next words would stay with me forever. "Mom, maybe it would be better if you didn't come to the dinner at the mansion before the wedding." For a moment, the whole room felt silent. I looked at my son, the little boy who once held my hand. The young man I had worked my whole life to protect. Finally, I asked softly, "Are you saying you're ashamed of me?" Marcus closed his eyes. "I just don't want them judging us." I nodded slowly. Then I reached across the table and gently patted his hand. "I understand." But deep inside, something told me this story wasn't really about being poor. There was a secret no one at that mansion knew, and before the wedding was over, everyone would find out who the mansion truly belonged to. The days after Marcus left, my house felt strangely quiet. I kept replaying our conversation in my mind. His words hurt, but what hurt even more was the look on his face. He wasn't angry. He looked afraid that someone else's opinion mattered more than his own mother. Still, I refused to let bitterness settle into my heart. Every morning, I sat on my front porch with a warm cup of coffee. My neighbors waved as they walked by, and I smiled back. Life had taught me that pain never stayed forever. You just had to keep moving one small step at a time. 3 days before the wedding, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hi, Mom." "Good morning, sweetheart." He hesitated before speaking. "Vanessa wants to meet you." My heart lifted. "Really?" "Yes, but just for lunch, nothing formal." "I'd love that." We agreed to meet at a small restaurant downtown. I wore my favorite navy blue dress. It wasn't expensive, but it was neat, simple, and one my late husband had always said looked beautiful on me. When I arrived, Marcus and Vanessa were already waiting. Vanessa stood and gave me a polite smile. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Jolly." "You can just call me Jolly," I said warmly. She nodded, though she never quite relaxed. During lunch, Marcus talked about wedding plans while Vanessa mostly listened. She was kind enough, but there was a distance between us, as if she wasn't sure how to treat me. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "My mother wants to know if everything is ready for tomorrow night's family dinner." Marcus immediately sat up straighter. "Oh, we'll be there." Vanessa looked at me for a moment before speaking carefully. "My parents are very traditional." I smiled. "Every family has its own way." She forced a small laugh. "I just hope everyone gets along." Something in her voice made me wonder if she was worried about me or worried about her parents. When lunch ended, Marcus walked me to my car. He looked around before speaking quietly. "Mom, tomorrow's dinner is very important." "I know. There will be business leaders, politicians, investors." I nodded. "I'm sure it'll be lovely." He swallowed hard. "I still think it's better if you don't come." His words landed softly this time, almost like he had practiced saying them enough that they no longer sounded cruel. I looked into his eyes. "Marcus, are you asking me because you believe it, or because someone else does?" He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. I reached into my purse and handed him a small wrapped box. "I bought this for you." He looked surprised. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Inside was his father's old silver watch. It wasn't worth much money, but it had been worn by 3 generations of men in our family. Marcus stared at it quietly. "Dad loved this watch." "I know. I thought you'd wear it on your wedding day." His eyes filled with tears for just a second, then he closed the box. "Thank you, Mom." He hugged me before walking away. As I drove home, I prayed that the watch would remind him where he came from. The next evening, I stayed home just as Marcus had asked. I cooked myself a simple dinner and turned on some soft music. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a message from my church friend Denise. "Jolly, I just drove past the Harrison mansion. It's beautiful. Are you there already?" I smiled sadly before replying. "No, I'm spending the evening at home." A few minutes later, another message appeared. "Why, aren't you the groom's mother?" I stared at the screen. For several seconds, I couldn't think of an answer. Finally, I typed just 4 words. "It's a long story." I set my phone aside and looked through my living room window at the evening sky. Somewhere across town, my son was sitting inside a mansion filled with crystal chandeliers, expensive paintings, and people who measured success by the size of a bank account. He probably believed I was safe at home. What he didn't know was that someone inside that mansion had just asked a very simple question. If Marcus's mother isn't here, then who actually owns this house? And before the night was over, that single question would begin to change everything. The morning of the wedding arrived with bright sunshine, but my heart felt heavy. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing the wrinkles from my navy blue dress. It was the same dress I had worn to lunch with Marcus. I wasn't planning to attend the wedding anymore. After our last conversation, I believed my son truly wanted me to stay away. Still, a mother's heart is difficult to silence. I folded the dress carefully and placed it back in my closet. Then I whispered to myself, maybe it's better this way. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice sounded rushed. "Mom, are you home?" "Yes. I need to stop by for a minute." 20 minutes later, his black SUV pulled into my driveway. The moment he walked inside, I could tell something was wrong. His smile looked forced. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" He nodded too quickly. "Yes, I just wanted to check on you." I offered him a glass of sweet tea and we sat together in the kitchen. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Marcus took a deep breath. "Mom, Vanessa's parents asked about you again." I looked at him quietly. "What did you tell them?" "I said you weren't feeling well." I lowered my eyes. "So now I'm sick." "I'm sorry," he whispered. I didn't know what else to say. Silence filled the room, then he reached across the table. "Mom, please understand, they have a certain lifestyle. Everything has to look perfect." I gently pulled my hand away. "Marcus." "Yes, when your father died, did our life look perfect?" He shook his head. "When I worked 2 jobs so you could finish college, was our life perfect?" "No. When I stayed awake all night helping you study before your exams, was any of that perfect?" His eyes filled with guilt. "No, Mom." I smiled sadly. "Then why are you chasing perfection now?" He couldn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window. "I love Vanessa." "I know you do. I don't want anything to ruin today." I nodded. "And you think I'm the thing that might ruin it?" Marcus turned slowly. His face said everything before his mouth did. "I'm afraid they'll judge you." I stood up. "No, son." He looked confused. "They won't judge me." I placed my hand over my heart. "They'll judge the woman who spent her whole life raising a good man." Tears filled Marcus's eyes. "I'm sorry." "I believe you are." For a long moment, we simply stood there. Then I reached into a kitchen drawer and pulled out a small white envelope. "I was going to give you this after the wedding." He looked at it. "What's inside?" "A letter." "What does it say?" I smiled gently. "You'll read it when the time is right." He accepted the envelope without opening it. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too." He hugged me tightly before walking out the front door. I watched his car disappear down the street. A few minutes later, I sat alone in my favorite chair. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even disappointed anymore. I was simply tired. As the afternoon passed, I turned on the television to distract myself. A local news station was covering the city's largest charity gala. The reporter stood outside the same mansion where Marcus's wedding reception would be held later that evening. I looked carefully at the screen. The mansion looked beautiful, large white columns, perfect gardens, a long driveway lined with old oak trees. It brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years, very old memories. Just then my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" A calm man's voice answered. "Good afternoon. May I speak with Mrs. Jolly Williams?" "This is Jolly." "My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm the family attorney for the Harrison estate." I frowned. "I think you've called the wrong person." "No, ma'am." There was a brief pause. "I've been trying to reach you for several weeks." My heart skipped a beat. "What is this about?" "It's regarding the ownership documents for the Harrison mansion." I felt completely confused. "I don't understand." "You will soon." His voice remained calm. "There has been a misunderstanding for many years." I gripped the phone tightly. "The mansion where your son's wedding is taking place." He paused before finishing his sentence. "Legally belongs to you." My world suddenly stood still. For a long moment, I couldn't say a single word. I held the phone tightly, wondering if I had heard the lawyer correctly. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "There must be some mistake." "I'm afraid there isn't, Mrs. Williams," Mr. Brooks replied calmly. Your late husband asked our office to protect certain documents until the right time. We recently discovered that no one had informed you. I slowly sat down. My husband owned that mansion? Yes, ma'am. I closed my eyes. Robert had never been a man who talked about money. Before he became ill, he worked with a real estate investment company. He often told me he was planning something for our future, but after he passed away, life became a struggle. Bills replaced dreams, and I never asked questions about unfinished business. I don't understand, I said. The Harrison family has been living there under a long-term legal agreement. After your husband's passing, the ownership should have transferred to you. Unfortunately, an administrative error delayed everything. I let out a slow breath. So, all these years. Yes, ma'am. I thanked him quietly before ending the call. The room became silent. I wasn't thinking about the mansion. I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about Marcus. My son had been ashamed of the very woman who, without knowing it, legally owned the house where he was getting married. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. When I opened the door, I saw Denise from church. She smiled warmly. Jolly, I was worried about you. I'm all right. She stepped inside and immediately noticed my face. What happened? I told her everything, from Marcus asking me not to attend, to the lawyer's phone call. Denise covered her mouth in disbelief. Oh, Jolly. I simply shook my head. I don't want revenge. I know you don't. I just wish my son had remembered who I was before judging who I wasn't. Denise gently squeezed my hand. Maybe today isn't the end of your story. Before I could answer, my phone rang again. It was Mr. Brooks. Mrs. Williams, I'm at the wedding reception. The reception? Yes, there has been a disagreement. What happened? The Harrison family is discussing ownership of the estate. I frowned. What do you mean? They've been preparing to announce that the mansion will remain in their family forever. My heart sank. Mr. Brooks continued. I have the original documents with me. The room fell quiet again. What should I do? I asked. His answer was simple. I believe you should come. I looked at Denise. She nodded without saying a word. 20 minutes later, we arrived outside the mansion. Luxury cars filled the long driveway. Guests in elegant suits and sparkling dresses laughed beneath glowing lights. For a moment, I wondered if I truly belonged there. Then I remembered something my husband used to tell me. Never let wealth decide your worth. I smiled softly. Mr. Brooks met us near the entrance. He greeted me with respect. Mrs. Williams. He opened the large front doors. Inside, hundreds of guests filled the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm golden light across polished marble floors. At the center of the room stood Marcus and Vanessa. They looked happy until Marcus saw me. His smile disappeared. He quickly walked toward me. Mom, his voice was barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? Before I could answer, Vanessa's father stepped forward. His expression was cold. I'm sorry, he said politely. This is a private family celebration. Mr. Brooks calmly walked beside me. It certainly is. The older man looked confused. And you are? Daniel Brooks. He opened a leather briefcase. Attorney for the legal owner of this estate. The ballroom became silent. Every conversation stopped. Every guest turned toward us. Vanessa looked at her father. Her father looked at the lawyer. Marcus looked at me. Mr. Brooks slowly removed a thick folder. I believe everyone deserves to know the truth. He placed the documents on the table. Then he spoke clearly enough for the entire room to hear. The legal owner of Harrison Mansion, he looked directly at me, is Mrs. Jolly Williams. A gasp swept through the ballroom. Marcus stood frozen. Vanessa covered her mouth. Her parents stared at the papers in complete disbelief. No one said a word, because in that single moment, the woman they thought was too poor to belong there had become the only person who truly did. For several long seconds, no one moved. The ballroom was so quiet that I could hear the soft music still playing in the background. Marcus stared at me with wide eyes. His face had turned pale. "Mom," he whispered. I looked at him, not with anger, but with the same love I had carried since the day I first held him in my arms. Mr. Brooks gently handed the documents to Vanessa's father. "I've verified every page," he said. "Mrs. Jolly Williams is the legal owner of this estate." Vanessa's father slowly flipped through the papers. The confidence that had filled his face only moments earlier was gone. This can't be possible," he murmured. "I'm afraid it is," Mr. Brooks replied. Guests began whispering to one another. Some looked surprised, others looked embarrassed. Many avoided looking at me at all. Marcus walked toward me, his eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I didn't know." I smiled softly. "I know you didn't." "No," he shook his head. "That's not what I mean." His voice broke. "I didn't know I had become someone who could hurt you like this." Those words touched my heart far more than the news about the mansion. For the first time in weeks, I saw my little boy again, not the successful businessman, not the groom trying to impress wealthy people, just my son. He slowly fell to his knees in front of everyone. "I'm so sorry." The room became even quieter. "I was afraid they would judge us." He wiped away a tear. "But I ended up judging the person who loved me the most." I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "Stand up, Marcus." He looked at me. "Please." He slowly rose to his feet. "You don't have to kneel before me," I said. "You're my son." He began crying openly. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I reached up and brushed a tear from his face, just as I had done when he was a little boy. "Maybe not today." He lowered his eyes. "But forgiveness isn't something people earn," I continued. "Sometimes it's a gift we give because carrying hate is too heavy." Marcus wrapped his arms around me. This time I cried too, not because of the pain, because I had finally gotten my son back. Vanessa quietly walked over. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams," I smiled. "You can call me Jolly." Fresh tears filled her eyes. I should have spoken up. "You're young," I said gently. "Sometimes it takes time to find your own voice." She nodded. "I promise I'll do better." "I believe you." Then Vanessa's parents approached. The proud expressions they had worn all evening were gone. Her father looked down before speaking. "Mrs. Williams, I owe you an apology." I simply listened. "I judged you by your clothes, your house, and your bank account." He took a deep breath. "I never stopped to learn who you really were." I smiled kindly. "We all make mistakes." He looked surprised. "Can you forgive me?" "I already have." His eyes filled with gratitude. A few moments later, Mr. Brooks walked over once more. "Mrs. Williams, there are several documents requiring your signature regarding the property." I looked around the beautiful ballroom, the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, the expensive decorations. Then I smiled. "I have only one request." Everyone looked at me. "I don't want this mansion." The room filled with surprised whispers. Mr. Brooks blinked. "You don't?" I shook my head. "A house has never made a family." I turned toward Marcus and Vanessa. "If the law allows it, I'd like the property placed in a family trust." Marcus looked confused. "A trust? So no one ever has to fight over it again." Tears rolled down his face once more. "Mom, I've spent my whole life building a family." I smiled warmly. "I'm not going to let money tear it apart." Later that evening, we sat together for the first time as one family. No one talked about wealth. No one talked about status. We laughed. We shared stories. We remembered Robert and the life we had built together. As I watched Marcus smile again, I realized something important. The greatest gift I had ever owned wasn't a mansion. It wasn't money. It wasn't property. It was the chance to teach my son that true wealth is measured by love, humility, and the people who stand beside you when everything else fades away. If there's one lesson my journey taught me, it's this: never measure a person's value by what they own. The richest hearts are often hidden behind the simplest doors. And the greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't money, it's kindness, integrity, and unconditional love. That night, I drove home in my old car with a peaceful heart. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel rich because of a mansion. I felt rich because my family had finally found its way back home.